Life often surprises us when we step outside our comfort zone. Today, I'll tell you about Raj, a young man from a small village in India. He dreamed of working in a big company, but there was one problem. He couldn't speak a single word of English. Imagine arriving in a city where every sound, sign, and voice feels foreign. That's where Raj's journey began, with confusion, fear, but also hope. His story isn't just about learning English, it's about courage, growth, and the power of not giving up. Raj's experience reminds us that progress is made step by step. Every mistake teaches us something new. Every small effort becomes a part of success. In this episode, we'll explore how Raj turned challenges into opportunities. You might even see your own story in his. So, take a deep breath. Let's begin this journey together. Raj arrived in the city on a dusty morning, his heart racing with excitement and fear. The bus door opened with a hiss, and he stepped out, holding a worn cloth bag in one hand. The city was louder, brighter, and faster than anything he had ever known. Cars honked, people shouted, and the air smelled like petrol and roasted corn. He looked around, trying to take it all in. Tall glass buildings stretched toward the sky, reflecting light in every direction. Back in his village, the tallest thing was the water tower near the rice fields. Here, everything seemed to move with a rhythm he didn't understand. For a moment, Raj stood still, lost in the rush of sounds and colors. He was not afraid of hard work. But this was different. This was a world built on words he didn't know. He could see them everywhere, on signs, on buses, on store windows. Words that looked beautiful but meant nothing to him. It felt like standing outside a locked door, hearing voices inside, but not knowing the key. Still, he held on to his dream, to find a job in an international company. He wanted to build a better life for his parents, who worked the soil from dawn to dusk. His mother used to tell him, "A seed grows only if you water it every day." Those words stayed with him now, echoing in the noise of the city. But dreams don't fill your stomach. Raj realized he hadn't eaten since sunrise. The smell of cardamom and milk led him to a small cafe tucked between two shops. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The place was warm and filled with quiet chatter. A man behind the counter smiled and said, "Hello." Raj froze. He knew that one word, but nothing else. He wanted to say, "I'd like tea, please," but his tongue refused to move. The words in his mind were locked behind a wall of silence. He pointed awkwardly at a cup on another table, hoping the man would understand. The shopkeeper said something again, his tone kind but quick. Raj heard only sounds, not meaning. It felt like rain hitting a roof, noisy, endless, impossible to catch. People looked his way, and heat rose to his face. He mumbled an apology in his own language and left. Outside, the air felt colder. The city suddenly seemed bigger and less friendly. How could he ever work in a company if he couldn't even order tea? Raj walked aimlessly, eyes down, passing bright billboards filled with English words. He felt invisible, small, powerless. But just as he turned a corner, something caught his attention. A group of children stood by a wall, repeating English sentences from their books. Their voices rose and fell like music, each word carefully shaped, each mistake corrected with laughter. Raj stopped and listened. He felt a spark, small but real. If they could learn, so could he. Maybe it wasn't about talent. Maybe it was about time and effort. He remembered his mother's words again. The seed grows only if you water it. That night, in his tiny rented room, Raj sat by the dim light of a single bulb. He pulled out a scrap of paper and wrote one word: T. He traced the letters slowly, as if they were sacred. It wasn't perfect, but it was his first step. Tomorrow, he promised, he would learn another word, then another. The city outside was still noisy and strange, but inside Raj's heart, a quiet determination had begun to grow. He didn't know how long it would take or how many times he would fail, but he knew this. He had started, and sometimes the hardest part of any journey is simply that beginning. The next morning, Raj walked through the city streets with a new sense of purpose. He had promised himself he would learn English, no matter how long it took. As he wandered past small shops and bus stops, he noticed a faded sign on a wall. It read, "Community Library, Free English Classes." His heart skipped a beat. Could this be his chance? Raj stood at the door for a while, hesitating. Inside, he saw a few people sitting on plastic chairs, books open on their laps. A woman at the front smiled warmly and said, "Welcome." Raj froze again, unsure how to reply. The woman repeated her greeting, slower this time, and switched to Hindi. "Are you here to learn?" she asked. Raj nodded, relief washing over him. It was the first time in the city someone had spoken to him with kindness. The class began with the alphabet, A, B, C. Simple letters, yet they felt like mountains. His tongue stumbled, his voice shaky. Every sound felt awkward and heavy. The children in the next row seemed to learn faster. Raj felt frustrated, almost embarrassed. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this isn't for me." The teacher overheard and knelt beside him. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Every expert was once a beginner, Raj. You just have to keep showing up." Her words landed deep in his heart. They stayed with him long after class ended. From that day, Raj arrived early and stayed late. He sat near the window with a stack of children's books. Bright covers, simple stories. At first, the sentences seemed silly to him. Talking cats, magic trains, stories about friendship and kindness. But as he read them aloud, something changed. He began to understand more. The words started to connect. He whispered them again and again until his voice found rhythm. Every page gave him a small sense of victory. He realized that even the simplest stories could teach him the most important lessons. Learning a new language wasn't just about grammar or pronunciation. It was about patience, about persistence, about believing that progress takes time. One afternoon, while struggling to say good morning, Raj noticed something new. He was smiling. For the first time, the effort felt joyful. He was no longer just learning. He was discovering. English was no longer a wall. It was a bridge to his dream. Every sound, every mistake was a step across that bridge. He began carrying a small notebook everywhere he went. Whenever he heard a new word, he wrote it down. At night, he would whisper those words to himself like prayers. Sometimes his pronunciation made him laugh, but he didn't care. He knew each word brought him closer to the life he wanted. One evening, he stayed behind after class to help the teacher clean up. She smiled and asked, "How do you feel about your learning?" Raj thought for a moment and said slowly, "Better, little by little." The teacher nodded. "That's how it always begins." That night, Raj walked home with light steps. The city still felt big and noisy, but it didn't scare him anymore. He began to see it differently, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Every street sign was a lesson. Every voice was an opportunity to listen. Every mistake was proof that he was trying. Raj knew he was still far from fluent. There were days when the words slipped away, when frustration crept back in. But he reminded himself of what his teacher said. Keep showing up. And he did. Day after day, word by word, he was building something stronger than language. He was building confidence. He was building a new version of himself. Sometimes progress doesn't shout. It whispers, and if you listen closely, you can hear it in the quiet moments, in the courage to begin again, in the choice to keep going, even when it's hard. Raj's days slowly began to follow a rhythm. Morning at the community library, afternoons doing small jobs, evenings with books. But deep inside, he knew classroom learning wasn't enough. If English was the bridge to his dream, he had to walk across it. One Monday morning, Raj made a promise to himself: I will speak English to someone every day. It sounded simple, but he knew it would take courage. That afternoon, he stopped by a tea stall near the bus stop. The shopkeeper looked busy, pouring milk into boiling tea. Raj's heart pounded. He rehearsed silently, over and over. One tea, please. One tea, please. When his turn came, he spoke, softly but clear. One tea, please. The man smiled and nodded. Raj exhaled, feeling a rush of pride. A small sentence, but a giant victory. Encouraged, he began to greet the bus driver every morning. Good morning? Sometimes the driver smiled back. Sometimes he didn't. But Raj kept going. Once, a passenger laughed when he stumbled over the word ticket. Raj's face burned, but he didn't stop. He had learned something powerful. Embarrassment fades, progress stays. Every day he tried to notice new words. He read signs on buses, listened to people at markets, copied phrases from conversations. He carried a small notebook in his pocket. Each time he heard a word he didn't understand, he wrote it down. Sometimes he guessed the spelling. Sometimes he drew pictures to remember. At night, no matter how tired he would sit on his bed and repeat the words aloud. He built sentences, practiced pronunciation, and read until midnight. Some days felt easy, full of small successes. Other days were harder, filled with silence and confusion. People spoke too fast. Sometimes they ignored him. But Raj reminded himself this was all part of learning. He realized English wasn't something you memorized. It was something you lived. Every mistake, every awkward pause, every misunderstood phrase, they were lessons. The city became his classroom, and the world around him became his teacher. One evening, while waiting for the bus, Raj saw a tourist looking lost. The man held a map, turning it around with a puzzled look. Raj hesitated, but decided to try. Can I help? He asked. The tourist smiled in relief. Yes, please. I'm looking for the market. Raj pointed down the street. Straight, then left. The tourist nodded. Thank you, friend. Raj smiled back, heart swelling with pride. It wasn't perfect English, but it worked. That moment became a turning point. For the first time, English didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door, and he had just opened it. He realized that language was not about speaking perfectly. It was about connection, about trying, about being brave enough to use the words you know. That night, he added a new sentence to his notebook. I can do this. And from that day, it became his daily mantra. Each morning, he whispered it before stepping out into the city. Each night, he wrote it again before sleeping. Raj's confidence began to grow quietly, like roots beneath the soil. He started noticing progress in small ways. He could understand short sentences from others. He could ask for directions without fear. Sometimes, he even caught himself thinking in English. One afternoon, his teacher asked him to read aloud in class. Raj stood up, hands trembling, and began. The words weren't perfect, but his voice didn't shake anymore. When he finished, his classmates clapped softly. He smiled, shy but proud. He knew he still had a long way to go, but something inside him had changed. He no longer saw himself as someone who couldn't speak English. He was someone who was learning, growing, improving every day, and that made all the difference. In that moment, Raj learned one of the most important lessons. Learning doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in courage. Raj stood outside the cafe, his palms damp with sweat. A small sign on the door read, "Part-time waiter needed. Basic English required." It looked simple enough, but to Raj, it felt like climbing a mountain. He had spent nights practicing answers in front of the mirror. "My name is Raj. I can work hard. I will always smile." He whispered those lines again now, hoping they would carry him through. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Behind the counter stood a tall man with a friendly face. "Hello?" the man said. "You must be here for the interview?" Raj nodded quickly, afraid his voice might fail him. They sat down by the window. The manager smiled and asked, "So, Raj, tell me about yourself." And just like that, everything Raj had practiced disappeared. His mind went blank, his throat dry. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The manager waited patiently, still smiling. Finally, Raj whispered, "My name, Raj." "Good," said the manager kindly. "What experience do you have?" Raj caught the word experience, but not the rest. His heart raced. He wanted to say, "I worked in a tea shop in my village." But the words twisted in his head. He stammered, "I, tea shop, work good." The manager's smile faded slightly. He asked a few more questions, but Raj only understood pieces. Schedule, weekends, customers. He guessed at answers, each one feeling wrong. The silence between them grew heavy. After a few minutes, the manager closed his notebook and said, "Thank you, Raj. We'll call you if we have a position for you." Raj knew what that meant. He stood up, nodded, and left quietly. Outside, the afternoon sun had turned gray. Within minutes, rain began to fall. Raj walked slowly, his shirt soaked, his thoughts heavier than the clouds. He replayed every moment in his head, every pause, every mistake. He had worked so hard, and still he had failed. The dream that once felt close now seemed impossibly far. By the time he reached his small rented room, he was shivering. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. His notebook lay open on the table, filled with English words and sentences. For the first time, he didn't want to touch it. He didn't want to practice or read. He just sat there, feeling the weight of disappointment. That night, he didn't study. He didn't even eat. He lay in bed, listening to the rain tapping on the roof. Every sound reminded him of that interview. The polite smile of the manager, the helpless silence, the shame of walking away with nothing. But the next morning, something small stirred inside him. A quiet thought whispered, "If I give up now, I'll never know how far I could go." Raj sat up slowly. The pain of yesterday was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't a wall anymore. It was a lesson. He looked at his notebook again. The pages were damp, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were still there. Customer, service, polite. Each one was a reminder of what he didn't know yet, and what he could still learn. Raj picked up his pen and opened to a blank page. He wrote in careful letters, "I will not stop." That sentence felt like a spark in the darkness. He decided to change the way he learned. No more random study, no more guessing. He would make a plan. He would listen to English every day, on the bus, while cooking, before bed. He would practice real sentences, not just words, and he would face his fear again and again until it became smaller. The interview had been a disaster, yes, but it also gave him something precious: clarity. Raj understood now that failure wasn't the end. It was a mirror showing him where to grow. That night, as he fell asleep, he whispered the same words again. I will not stop. Because sometimes the most powerful promise you can make is the one you make to yourself. After the failed interview, Raj sat on his bed for hours, staring at his notebook. The sound of rain had faded, but his thoughts still felt heavy. He couldn't stop asking himself one question. Why wasn't I improving faster? He thought about all the times he had studied without focus, sometimes reading a few pages, sometimes skipping practice altogether. There was no system, no structure, just effort without direction. And that's when it hit him. Success needs a plan. Big dreams need small, consistent steps. So the next morning, Raj opened a fresh notebook. At the top, he wrote in bold letters, "My English plan." He divided the page into 3 parts: reading, speaking, listening. Under each one, he wrote 30 minutes, 90 minutes a day, no excuses. For reading, he went back to the library and borrowed children's books again. Simple stories about cats, trains, and magic castles. He felt shy at first, sitting among kids' books as an adult man. But soon he realized that simplicity is the best teacher. The short sentences helped him understand patterns. The repetition made the words stick. Each story gave him a small win. For speaking, Raj created his own rules. He had to speak English at least once a day, even if it was just a greeting to the shopkeeper or a short conversation with a neighbor. At home, he stood in front of the mirror and practiced. I'd like a cup of tea, please. Can you help me find the bus stop? Sometimes he laughed at himself, hearing how strange his accent sounded, but he kept going. For listening, Raj turned his evenings into practice time. At first, he tried English news, but it was too fast, so he switched to songs and movies with subtitles. He listened, paused, repeated. The words started to sound familiar, even friendly. He tried a new method called shadowing, listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately. It felt awkward at first, like singing along with a language. But soon he noticed he was catching rhythm, tone, and emotion. Language was no longer just words. It was sound, feeling, flow. One evening at the library, Raj noticed a poster on the wall. Language exchange group. Learn together. His heart beat faster. It was perfect. A place to practice with real people. The first time he went, he felt nervous. There were 5 strangers sitting around a table, all with the same goal. The group leader smiled and said, "Here, we help each other." One woman wanted to practice Hindi because she loved Bollywood movies. Another man was from England, trying to learn simple Hindi phrases for work. In exchange, they helped Raj with English. He learned to say things like, "In my free time, I like to read," and "Could you speak more slowly, please?" The room filled with laughter and learning. Mistakes didn't feel embarrassing anymore. They felt like progress. Week after week, Raj kept following his plan, 90 minutes every single day. He read, he spoke, he listened. And slowly, something inside him began to shift. The words came to his mind faster. He no longer froze when someone spoke English to him. He could follow conversations without needing subtitles. And more than that, he felt different, focused, confident, in control. The memory of his failed cafe interview still stung. But now it wasn't a wound. It was fuel. He understood something powerful. Learning a language isn't about talent. It's about consistency. It's about showing up every day, even when no one's watching. One night, Raj closed his notebook and whispered, "This is working." Then he smiled, a quiet, humble smile, because he finally knew he was moving forward. And when you find your rhythm, even the hardest journey begins to feel possible. The bell above the shop door jingled softly as Raj stepped inside. It was his first day at a new job, a small convenience store that sold snacks and drinks. Not the big international company he once dreamed of, but it was a start. The owner, Mr. Kumar, greeted him with a kind smile. "Remember, Raj," he said, "say hello to every customer in English, and don't forget to smile." Raj nodded, his heart beating fast. This was his first real chance to use English at work. He had practiced greetings 100 times at home, but now it was real. The first customer, an elderly woman, walked in. Raj took a deep breath and said, "Good morning, ma'am." She smiled warmly and replied, "Good morning, young man." Raj froze for a second, then smiled back. He had understood her perfectly. That one short exchange filled him with pride. All those nights of practice had led to this moment. Throughout the day, Raj greeted more customers. Some spoke quickly, others mumbled, but he managed to keep up. When he didn't understand, he politely said, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Each small conversation became a lesson. Each smile from a customer became a reward. By evening, his nervousness had faded into quiet confidence. He had spoken English all day and survived. That night, as he locked up the shop, Raj thought about how far he had come. He remembered his first interview, the silence, the embarrassment, the rain. Now he stood in the same city, speaking English with strangers, and they understood him. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The next week, something special happened. A tourist couple from England walked in, looking slightly lost. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Do you know a good place to eat nearby?" Raj hesitated for just a moment, then replied, "Yes, there is a restaurant 2 streets away. Turn right, then left. It's very good." The woman smiled brightly. "Thank you. You speak very good English." Raj's heart filled with joy. No one had ever said that to him before. When he got home that night, he called his parents. His mother laughed with happiness, and his father said proudly, "Hard work always shows." At the shop, his coworkers began to notice his progress too. "Your English is improving fast," one of them said. "Soon you'll be teaching us." Raj laughed, but inside those words meant everything. Each compliment, each small success became fuel. He began to keep a success journal. Every evening, he wrote down something he had done well in English that day. Even small things, like saying thank you correctly or understanding a new word. On difficult days, when doubt crept in, he opened that journal and read it. Each line reminded him how far he'd come. The victories were small, but they were real. And together, they built his confidence one step at a time. But as Raj grew more comfortable, he also grew more ambitious. He realized this job, while helpful, wasn't his final goal. He still dreamed of working in a bigger company, one where English was essential. One evening, as he walked home, he passed a modern glass building. Through the windows, he saw people in suits speaking fluent English. He imagined himself among them, confident, contributing, part of something greater. That vision stayed with him all the way home. He knew what he wanted next. It was time to try again, time for another challenge. But this time, he wasn't the same man who had failed months ago. He had real experience now. He had faced customers, handled conversations, and learned from every mistake. He had built a foundation of courage. At home, Raj opened his calendar and marked a date 2 months ahead. "Apply for new jobs," he wrote in capital letters. Until then, he would double his efforts. More reading, more listening, more speaking. He knew the journey wasn't over. But now, for the first time, he wasn't just learning English. He was living it. And every good morning and every thank you was proof that he was on the right path. Raj stood in front of a tall glass building, his reflection staring back at him. He adjusted his shirt, took a deep breath, and smiled nervously. It was the day of his second interview, his second chance. Months ago, he had walked into a cafe and failed to say more than 2 sentences. But today felt different. He wasn't the same man anymore. He had practiced every day, spoken to hundreds of customers, and learned from every mistake. His hands still trembled slightly, but not from fear, from excitement. Inside the building, the lobby buzzed with energy. People in suits walked confidently, their English flowing effortlessly. Raj felt the familiar pressure in his chest, but he reminded himself, I belong here. When the interviewer called his name, he stood tall and walked in. Hello, Raj. Nice to meet you, said the manager with a friendly tone. Raj smiled and replied clearly, Nice to meet you too, sir. The interview began with a question that had once terrified him. So, Raj, tell me about yourself. This time, Raj didn't freeze. He spoke slowly but confidently. My name is Raj. I have experience working with customers. I like learning new skills and working hard. The manager nodded, impressed by his calmness. Of course, Raj still made small mistakes. A wrong verb here, a missing article there. But instead of panicking, he smiled and said, Sorry, I'm still learning. That honesty made the manager smile back. They talked about teamwork, problem solving, and customer service. Raj didn't understand every single word, but he understood enough. He asked questions when needed, and his confidence filled the room. When the interview ended, the manager leaned forward and said, Raj, I can see how hard you've worked. That's the kind of dedication we want on our team. I'd like to offer you the position. For a second, Raj couldn't believe it. Then he grinned widely and said, Thank you, sir. I will work hard. As he walked out of the building, he felt lighter than air. He remembered that rainy day after his first interview. The shame, the silence, the walk home in the storm. But this time the sky was clear, and so was his heart. He had turned failure into fuel, fear into focus. A week later, Raj began his new job at the international company. The first day felt overwhelming. People spoke fast, used slang, and tossed around idioms he had never heard. He sometimes understood half, the conversation sometimes less. But instead of feeling lost, he felt challenged. Whenever he didn't understand something, he asked politely, Could you explain that again, please? He wrote new words in his notebook, just like he used to. At lunch, he sat with coworkers, listening carefully to how they spoke. He didn't talk much at first, but he observed everything, how they greeted, joked, and shared ideas. Every evening after work, Raj reviewed what he had learned that day. He watched short English videos about business conversations and took notes. He turned confusion into knowledge. A week later, his manager stopped by his desk. Raj, he said with a smile, I can already see your improvement. Keep it up. Those words meant more than any paycheck. Raj knew this wasn't just about getting a job. It was about becoming the person who deserved it. His second chance had become his turning point. He realized that true growth doesn't come from winning the first time. It comes from standing up after failing, stronger and wiser. That evening, as he left the office, Raj looked up at the tall building glowing in the sunset. He smiled to himself and whispered, I did it. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one built on courage, resilience, and the power of never giving up. Raj sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. It was hard to believe how far he had come, from a boy who couldn't say tea to a man who spoke English with confidence and kindness. He thought of his mother's words: "The seed grows only if you water it every day." Now, he finally understood. His journey had been full of mistakes, failures, and doubt, but each challenge had shaped him. He had learned that success doesn't come from perfection. It comes from persistence, from showing up even when it's hard. Raj smiled softly and whispered, "If I can do it, you can too."